Morning, everyone. Happy holidays and welcome to the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners for Tuesday, December 11th. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Sobroff, Decker, Bonner, Figueroa Villa, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay. Consent agenda items A, B, and C. We have one public comment on A.
Mr. President, it's 3 now on A and 1 on B.
3 on A and 1 on B. Okay, we have a motion for approval of number 1C. Second?
Yes, second.
All in favor? Aye, no one's opposed. Okay, let's hear the comments on 1A.
Okay, we have the Red Chief, Michael Novick, and Mr. Herman, and Wayne. So that's 4.
Hold on for a sec. Mr. Spindler, sir, all your chattering and stuff now that the meeting started, just a minute, is disruptive, so please stop. Thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Good morning, the Red Chief Hunt. I want to talk a little bit about the iPads and what's going on with the donations. I feel that there's great need for iPads and there's great needs for donations, but I also feel that there's great need for donations for the public as well. So I want to see some of those donations goes out to the public. The Red Chief Hunt. Let's get it going, and it's got to be a brand new year. So these donations have to reflect everything from the department to the public. Thank you, the Red Chief Hunt.
Thank you, sir. Happy holiday. Next.
Michael Novick, please.
Mr. Novick.
Yeah, in relation to this particular donation and to all the donations, I think I'm glad to hear that you are doing a sum up, but I think that, again, you should advise these foundations and groups like the Dodgers to donate the money to more needy causes than the Los Angeles Police Department or the Los Angeles Office of the Chief of Police. Chief of Police is well remunerated for his work, and on top of that is double dipping with his drop pension. And so I think that if you're going to get $4,000 from the Police Foundation, you should add it to the money used to house homeless people or to provide mental health services in the city, and not to the Office of the Chief of Police.
Thank you.
Mr. Herman, followed by Wayne.
You know, I'm having a very difficult time understanding what a monetary donation is. When the police department receives, or I should say, for the record, has the highest budget, and yet with its crisis on homelessness, why do they continue not to post the donations out in the lobby so the public can foresee who the donors are? Because there's a potential abuse of money laundering, like what Jose Huizar did with donation money from developers.
Let's go on to the topic.
So, because I'm in need of an iPhone, and I believe I'm entitled to an iPhone since we're paying for mental health counseling by LAPD, how the fuck do you expect me to call you if I don't have an iPhone? How the fuck do you expect me to reach out and touch someone on an iPhone issue?
iPhone.
This is about iPhone, whatever it is. If you would fucking let me finish talking about one iPad that should not be valued at $4,000 because it should be valued at $8,000 to include Mr. Herman's Christmas present, like I received my vest and fucking light for pedestrian safety.
Next speaker, please.
I'm not done. I got
Yes,
33
you're done.
motherfucking seconds, Mr. Sobroff.
No, you
and
were
every
off
time
topic.
I'm here, you don't like criticism
Next
because
speaker.
you're a white nigger
The next
Jew.
speaker
and
is
you
Wayne.
don't like people speaking
Wayne.
against the bad rules you subject
Next
us to.
speaker.
Unfair treatment. Unfair treatment. Unfair treatment, jackass. And I got 17, 16 seconds. Why don't you let me finish talking
Mr.
about
Herman,
donations?
last warning. I'm going to ask you to
I'm
leave the
warning
meeting.
you, whatever. I'm warning you.
So, hate and discontent in the room. So, what? 4 iPhones. Come on, Eileen Decker, which model iPhone are we talking about? And then we get an iPad. What model? See, because Eileen Decker understands what the term constructive dividends are. And what you got is a tax donation, a write-off, for $4,000 for shit that's not even close to the value of $4,000. It all started, this thing on 1A, back when President Clinton donated his underwear and took a tax credit. So 1A is some big fat slob from the police foundation getting a couple of phones and an iPad, probably stolen out of somebody's car in South Central, and used for a donation rounded off to the convenient number of $4,000. May I see the appraisal certificate for these 5 items, please, Mr. T-Fang? What are these model numbers? Because I went online last night and I attempted online to buy 4 iPhones and 1 iPad. And I came up with a minimum $975 if it's the prior model without the new OS, up to no more than $2,200. So where is this $4,000 so-called fee coming from? I think this is federal tax fraud, because it's going to go on somebody's tax return and it ain't worth nearly $4,000, but that's okay in the world of Eileen Decker, isn't it? Because Eileen Decker was born to help this city steal billions of federal funds. Congratulations, love.
Okay.
We have no other comment cards for this item.
The motion to approve item number 1A, please. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to 1B.
We have Mr. Herman and Wayne.
Okay.
Here on December 5th, apparently we have an amount of $1,400 going to the Los Angeles Police Foundation. And it will be used to create a tribute page on my behalf and that of the public. As you see, we're giving people. We've always been givers and also receivers of police abuse. But to this monetary donation here, under the program booklet, we're going to have a particular charter amend Section 202 ADA 121 through 32 ETSEQ under 54950 ETSEQ, in addition to protect our rights under the Bain Act 52.1. This way, we can see that Ms. Connie Rice is well-known civil rights attorney, like well-known civil rights attorney Mr. Wayne Spindler and Mr. Michael Hunt, Ninth Circuit winner, 2 times. And I'm working on my voluntary city attorney rights of recognition one day when I'm buried in hell and find out that I left a contribution of $1.5 million in a donation to the Los Angeles Police Foundation on my behalf, in honor of the public's interest and in support of every comment made by the public. And again, Ms. Decker, I want to thank you and the Obama fraud for all the recognition that you will sponsor us on. And in addition to that, thank you so much. Thank you for all you do for us, Office of the Chief of Police, Mr. Moore. Thank you.
Wayne.
So again, thank you for purchasing Connie Rice. This is a good investment for the Chief of Police. There's nothing better than taking and buying yourself a civil rights attorney in case you get the next shoot in the back incident. Because, of course, you got to have friends. And friends are very important in downtown Los Angeles. So what you get is you got a booklet, right? A booklet. Nobody's going to read the booklet. But what happens is we sell pages in the booklet. And that booklet page is funded by criminal campaign donors through a 501c3 or a 501c4 who purchase
Go on
in
to
turn
topic for a few
the
seconds here. Off topic?
utterly fucking disgraceful. I am on topic because I'm telling you how you pay the booklet pages. Your nonprofit pays for it, and they get the money from whom? They get the money from donations from whom? Who is going to donate to this fucking thing? Who has an interest in it? Developers. That's right. And who else has an interest in this? Cops. And who else has an interest in it? Covering up murders, of course. And Connie Rice is going to get this big bag of money for this booklet. A booklet that nobody's going to read, is going to be stacked on the floor, because what we want for the police, and again, the objective here is to get a puppet on our side, so when you shoot the next unarmed black man without probable cause on Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 7, you'll have Connie Rice say the following: well, in my opinion, the officer had probable cause upon which to fire upon the suspect. And there you go. Summary judgment for the city.
And we have no other comments on this item?
A motion for approval? Second? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, we're going to go to item number 2A, which was continued from December 4th, the department's report regarding the grant application and acceptance.
Good morning, Commissioners. Captain Andy Nyman from Valley Traffic Division. And this morning I have with me part of my off-road team that's headed by Sergeant Ron Alberca and Officer Steve Carbajal.
So wait, the tape recorder? Okay, so you can leave. I've given you enough warnings. You can leave. Mr. What's his name? Herman? Mr. Herman, you can leave the meeting. Take the tape recorder with you. Mr. Herman, you can leave the meeting.
I'm trying to leave, and as I'm leaving,
Okay, let's go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner. So in the Valley Traffic Division, we have an off-road unit that deals with a lot of our illegal off-highway vehicles that operate up in the mountains and things like that. Sergeant Alberca and Officer Carbajal have been instrumental over the last 9 or 10 years in obtaining grants from the state, from the Highway of Transportation Safety, to do these enforcements so that we can make sure that our communities are not plagued with people who are riding illegal motorcycles and off-highway vehicles. In doing that, Officer Carbajal and the team has been in contact with other groups that participate in off-highway vehicle stuff. This morning we're here to present a grant that we have applied for and actually have obtained approval from the state called NYPM, which is the National Youth Project Utilizing Mini Bikes. It's an educational program that basically targets underprivileged youth to get them some motivation and build some skills that will help them throughout their life. And so rather than having me talk about it, I'll let Officer Carbajal explain it, because this is very near and dear to him, and one of the reasons that he's actually sitting here as a Los Angeles Police Motor Officer today. So, Steve, I'll give it to you.
Good morning,
Sir.
Commissioners, Chief. Good morning. In brief, this came to me about a year ago. I was invited up to Sacramento to attend a commission meeting through California State Parks. And they informed me that California State Parks was joining Honda, which basically has a NIPM program, and it's been in existence. This is going to be, the 2019 will be the 50th year. And what it basically does is it takes juveniles, inner city kids, and it allows programs to mentor these kids and develop them to become basically good citizens. And we had an opportunity this year with California State Parks, being our 9th year grant with them, that they allowed us to utilize the education grant. So we put in for that education grant, and we actually received an award. And we're going to be the first police department to have the opportunity to partner with NIPM and California State Parks in this. So if I may show you a video, and it basically is a condensed video of what the NIPM program is about.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to play, Steve. It's just not connected. We're having a little difficulty with connecting the laptop. So
Okay, so we're just watching here.
yeah, no, it's not connecting, Commissioner. So I apologize. Yeah,
Okay.
you keep vamping, and I'll see if I can get this to work. Apologize.
So the NIPM program, basically, the way we wrote the grant was to incorporate our juvenile programs for the department. It'd be our cadets, PALS, and Jeopardy programs, and utilizing the kids that struggle the most, that need the mentoring. We were going to be able to basically provide the motorcycle as a tool for us to be able to join these kids, give them an opportunity, something that they might not have the economical means to go out and ever experience. And if I can add that, when I was a kid, about 9, 10 years old, one of my fellow baseball player teammates invited me to go out and enjoy the day with his father and him to ride motorcycles out in Indian Dunes out in Santa Clarita, which used to be there. And that moment for me was what basically led me to be a motor officer today. That really inspired me. It gave me direction and something that I always wanted to do. So I truly believe that, if we're able to target these youths early and develop them and give them opportunity, that we can change their lives. So I'm very pleased and just to be able to bring this program to the department. We are going to be the first department on the West Coast that has the opportunity to join this NIPM program.
Training's at Davis twice a month.
Yes, the training will be at Davis facility. We wrote it for twice a month, 14 juveniles, the ages between 10 and 17. And once they develop the basic fundamentals of controlling that motorcycle safely, then we will take them up to Hungry Valley and we will safely trail ride them. NIPM also has rodeos, and what it is kind of like the Boy Scouts, where they come together, all different chapters throughout the United States will come together. This year it happens to be up at Hungry Valley, and what you do is they interact with other kids from all over the United States, and they basically compete. So we're looking forward, hopefully if everything goes well, we're looking forward to having our kids from Los Angeles be part of that.
Do we have any questions by any of the commissioners on the program or on the approval of the grant?
Perfect. If I may just add, I'd like to bring a really special guest that actually was really responsible for incorporating NIPM with California State Parks. He's a Commissioner, Paul Slavic from California State Parks.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Welcome.
Paul Slavic. I'm actually a governor-appointed commissioner of California State Parks, so I'm very interested in how you can participate in these meetings. It's very interesting.
So are we.
So I'm I'm born and raised in Los Angeles, longtime resident of this beautiful city. Don't live here anymore, but what I think. Some years ago, the governor made a statement that state parks needed to be more relevant to disenfranchised youth, especially. Bring kids from the city and get them out in the outdoors. To that end, I had been working with Police Activities League for some years, with a very similar program to what we're talking about right now. But because of the kind of the movement of officers throughout their departments and stuff, we'd get somebody trained and then they'd move on and we'd have to train somebody else. When the opportunity came about to partner with LAPD, it seemed like a real marriage made in heaven. They have a lot of kids. They have kids in the demographics we need to be addressing. And this program, which was the best kept secret, I worked for American Honda for 30 years, and I'll tell you, this program was the best kept secret at American Honda for all those years, and it's been very successful. It's basically a mentoring program that it targets children, using the small motorcycle as a tool to get the kid interested in diverting his behavior. And that's essentially, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Okay. Commissioners?
Could one of you explain the level of experience of the officers that will be needed? Because while it sounds like a great opportunity, obviously there's some danger involved. So I'd like to know the precautions being taken for the security of the children involved.
Yes. First of all, this has been reviewed by one of our city attorneys and gone through risk management. So all the legalities has been overlooked or been looked at and approved. All the officers that are going to be partake and in the program are going to go through 6-day certification through NIPM, through Honda, to become certified instructors. And obviously, safety is going to be our number one concern. And this program has been around for 50 years. So the injuries that I believe that have been related to it, what I've been instructed has been very, very minor. There's been one child that had sustained a burn to his leg from sitting on the bike, and that's been addressed. So any other thing that I can add?
No. Well, I would say that from an insurance standpoint, insurance premiums have gone down because the program has been so successful at keeping kids safe. It's a step-by-step process. When these kids are first put on a motor vehicle that's sized to their particular stature, that it's a 29-step program before they actually even be able to ride around in a circle. So it's very organized. Like Steve said, it's a certified program, so these instructors have to go through a course that's already been, I can't think of the word. Vetted was the word I was looking for. And the fact that American Honda and California State Park attorneys have been dealing with this for about a year as far as the legality is concerned and who's liable and who's not liable. We're within a few days of actually signing off on this from the American Honda and the California State Park attorney's perspective, and so we're moving forward with a pretty big partnership, really, as far as California State Parks is concerned with.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with NIPM. We had a program at my nonprofit back in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was primarily to keep kids out of gangs, and kids that participated in the program at Wilderness Survival. I wish it would have been more, but many went on to college and have turned their lives around and are running our programs.
And what was the name? What was the name of your program?
It's El Centro del Pueblo in Echo Park, but we were the we were a team post in the late 60s, so they funded the team posts all over the city with NIPM program.
If I might just give add to a little bit to this, in that time frame, there was kids in South Central LA that were kind of getting involved in this program little by little, and they got challenged to ride to Mexico, to Baja, from the California border at San Ysidro all the way to the tip of Baja, and this was before there were roads. These kids, I think there's about 15, 16 of them, had to raise money for about 2 years, and basically it was a challenge. And the name of the video, and you could Google this video, it's called Road to Manhood. And it was an amazing opportunity for these kids to take part in something they never would have dreamed possible. And it changed their lives.
Thank you. Okay, any other commissioner? Yes. Commissioner Bonner?
Yeah, 2 questions. One, the proposal indicates that the idea is to integrate the NIPM program into existing youth programs of the department. Can you speak a little bit as to exactly how that will be done in terms of actually how you'll be selecting children, how the kids will actually get into the program?
So we will work with Commander Woodyard, who's in charge of oversees all the youth programs, both the cadets and the Jeopardy programs. So we are going to leave it up to those individual units to select kids that they feel would be most benefited by this program. So we will not be involved in the selection of those individuals, which will make it a very diverse spread across the city in terms of the kids that we get. And again, the focus of this program is not to reward kids that are doing great, but to reward kids that have really overcome some extreme obstacles and really need that extra boost to encourage them to continue that. And because we have ages 10 through 17, we expect to get quite a few kids that will probably be on a waiting list because of our limitations in terms of the small classes that we put together.
Excellent. And the other question then is about the other side of the equation, the adults who are involved. You spoke a minute about the 29 steps that you go through before you get the kids. So how do you what kind of training, if any, do the adults go through as to how to mentor a child? So you take someone who knows a lot about off-highway vehicles, interested in kids, but mentoring itself is kind of a specialized area. So what kind of training, if any, do they go through to actually be equipped to mentor the kids?
There's a 6-day program that is been once again certified. In other words, it's gone through many steps of the process about mentoring. So it's integrated into, if an officer, let's say, comes, he has no off-highway vehicle skills at all. So while he's learning to ride the vehicle, he's also learning to mentor kids, and they're, of course, they're fingerprinted in the whole routine about kids that have to, adults that have to interact with kids.
Yeah, the other part about this is when the kids are actually out there participating in the program incorporates bringing in adult mentors from all different professions to actually act as mentors as well, to present options and career paths to kind of inspire the kids as well. So it's multi-leveled in terms of just not riding motorcycles. This is all about creating a much better, more well-rounded individual.
And
if I may, that was a good point, because this program, built into this program, is a mentoring aspect, but beyond that is career development. So at California State Parks, as these kids have their downtime when they're not riding vehicles, they'll get presentations from anybody that is operating, let's say, a maintenance vehicle, or environmental scientists, or in fact, most of the people that are involved on the state side are police officers. So these kids are going to be exposed to a whole different perspective of where they can go in their lives.
I guess the last thing I just encourage you to keep a focus on the issue I'm raising, or the question I'm raising about the mentoring skill set itself, because a lot of times people think it just takes an interested, a well-meaning adult that either has kids or likes kids or wants to be mentors, and it's a relationship that, if it's not cultivated and managed and dealt with in a way that is appropriate, not just to the adult but in particular to the child, there's lots of circumstances where that relationship is not successful. So I just encourage you to not overlook the importance of making sure that everybody's really prepared to address that, in addition to the safety elements of operating a vehicle.
Absolutely.
Do we have any public comments on this?
Yes, sir. We have Wayne and we have Michael Williams.
Bonner is afraid of the unspoken gorilla in the room. He's afraid that people with children could get into inappropriate circumstances out there in the highway, out there in the wilderness with tents, out there in the woods where it's cold and dangerous and there's bears. And of course, a man gets into a tent with a boy, and things can happen. You can have a Brokeback Mountain situation here in this program, right in the front of you here, and you just don't know. The ability of a young man to experience his first sexual experience off-highway, it's very sexy, but it's also not legal. So what we need to really do, and I'm glad somebody's here from the governor's office, we need to legalize sodomy at the age of 14. I think that that's something that needs to be done in the agenda dealing with this off-highway motor vehicle situation. Because Steve Soboroff knows the personal awareness of such things when a young man blossoms into the age and decides that a heterosexual experience is not on highway, but rather off highway. So, again, when we ride our motorcycles and our SUVs in the mountains and experience the beauties of nature, also remember that we have legal impediments that we need to get done in Sacramento to have the whole award and acceptance experience done. because the reality is that if anybody from LAPD is again caught fucking kids, it's going to be liability up the fucking ass of Mike Fuhrer. Thank you.
Michael Williams.
Yeah, Mr. Williams?
And we do have one late card on this item, sir.
Okay. Okay, we'll hear it. Mr. Williams?
All these public service things that you talk about in inner city communities are all insurance policies for the police. They're insurance policies so that when they kill another person in these communities that they're claiming that they help, they can look good and say, well, see, we've helped all these kids. You see how much kids we helped, even though we've killed a bunch of other ones? This is all that this is. And instead of giving that money to LSUSD, who right now has over a $400 million deficit, has a $400 million deficit compared to the LAPD, which has over 50% of the budget, current budget of Los Angeles County. Instead of giving that grant to them, who would use that money to actually help children that they're not actually just also killing, we're giving money to more money to the LAPD so that they can continue their campaign to cover up or to make light of the fact that you're still killing people. And you're killing kids. Jesse Ramiro was 14 years old and he was murdered. Jose Mendez was 16 years old and he was murdered. And so you know what you can do? You know what you can do to help the kids in the inner city? You know what you can really do? Stop killing their friends and stop killing them. How about you take away the budget from these people, stop going for grants, and allow the LAUSD to get these grants and do this work? And how about you work on decreasing your policing in these communities and not murdering 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds? That's what you can do to help the inner city.
Next speaker?
Okay, the next speaker is Becca. I can't read the last name. And we do have one more card. So Becca and John Avalos.
Hi. Well, I just wanted to say that I support the last comment that was made. It seems like common sense. And I just have a question because, we talk about this program helping kids, and there's been no discussion of whether it's going to help girls as much as it's going to help boys. And I think it needs to, if you say that there's going to be a huge wait list, and that there's going to be a lot of demand for enrollment, there's no excuse. You should be able to have a 50-50 split for boys and girls. Same goes for which communities this is going to benefit. It should be a representative of the demographics of our city, and it should really help, people who are in need. And also, I just feel very skeptical that, there's the name of a company is being brought up, like Honda, over and over and over again. And this isn't a commercial for Honda. We could, obtain these vehicles from other companies as well. And I just feel very skeptical that, there's a specific company that's being highlighted. And I just don't understand why public time is being allocated for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last?
John Avalos.
Mr. Avalos? Yeah, sure.
Good morning, everybody.
Joe, hold on. We'll start you in 1 second.
Testing. Okay.
And just to clarify, I made an assumption that, based on the comments of the last speaker, I want to be sure is accurate. The program will be equally available to young boys and to young girls as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Young men and women.
Yeah. In fact, if the video had played, you would have seen that the program integrates both young boys and
It's a good point, though. Thank you.
Girls.
Mr. Avalos?
Yeah.
Good morning, sir.
As I see this proposal, I'm always go home really concerned that the chief tends to take credit, the police take credit when crime goes down. Instead of us, the village and the educators and the community people taking credit, the police get all the credit. Wow, They're doing a great job. Crime is down. First of all, that's really blows my mind. Now, these gentlemen here, the first thing I think about, oh, they want to create some future motorcycle cops. But that's just my weird thought. Oh, somebody kind of thinks that way. But don't forget what happened at Santa Monica. The Police Activities League. Are you kind of like Police Activities League in Santa Monica? You know what they do? They take money away from those of us who are trying to create social programs, social justice centers for the youth. It's called the PICO Youth and Youth Service there, PICO Center in Santa Monica. You just take the money away from them. That's what happened. The cops, and they create youth programs. And then what happened? What happened? So I think you really need to think twice on that.
Thank you.
I'll be back for the general comments. Congratulations to Silent Sandra. She finally spoke for the first time after 3 years that I've been coming here. Congratulations, Sandra.
Okay. We have a motion for approval of the department's report and transmit to the mayor and city council.
So moved.
We have a second? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, so let's go to item number 2B. This is the executive. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
This is executive director's report regarding commissioners' response to a city council ad hoc committee on police reform relative to qualifications for hearing examiners. Mr. Tefank, as I understand this item, the city council has jurisdiction regarding the Board of Rights process and any ordinance to implement Measure C. However, the city council has requested that this commission, the police commission, with the assistance of the city attorney, to make changes to qualifications for civilian hearing examiners, including enhancing diversity, increasing the number of city residents, and allowing for the inclusion of retired command staff police officers, which would require a minimum 1-year cooling off period for the retired LAPD command staff. So let me tell you right now, okay, the lady right there that's talking, you're going to get a chance to come up there to the microphone, and we're not going to interrupt you. So if you would stop interrupting or disrupting the meeting, so that will be your final warning. So if you stop disrupting the meeting, it would be much appreciated, please, so we can continue.
Are you ready for the presentation, sir?
So the only matter before the commission today, and ultimately the city council may accept or modify any recommendations from the commission. With that, will you present your report for the item to us, Mr. Tefank?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the commission, as you set the report up, the voters in Los Angeles approved Measure C in May of 2017.
Can you speak into the microphone a little better? Yeah, thanks.
Is it on?
Is it on?
It is on.
Okay, good.
Okay. I'll
Much better.
speak much louder. Thank you very much. In May of 2017, the voters of Los Angeles approved Measure C. Measure C allowed for a police officer to elect, rather than 2 sworn members of the command staff and 1 civilian hearing examiner to sit on the Board of Rights, the officer could choose 3 civilian hearing examiners. So that process does not take place until the City Council implements an ordinance, which then outlines the process going forward. So the Council created the Ad hoc Committee on Police Reform, and from that committee came a request to the City Council, and you identified the areas which the Ad hoc Committee recommended, and I will go over those again as it relates to the Police Commission. Request the Police Commission, with the assistance of the City Attorney, to make changes to the qualifications for civilian hearing examiners, including enhancing diversity, increasing the number of city residents, and allowing for the inclusion of retired command staff police officers, which would require a minimum 1-year cooling off period for retired LAPD command staff. So that recommendation was approved by the council and directed the commission to prepare a response. What I have prepared for you is the response, and I'll give a little background to this. The hearing examiners are considered a part-time, as-needed city employee. They are employees of the Board of Police Commissioners. The Board of Police Commissioners administers the hearing examiner process. Hearing examiners are utilized in two mechanisms. One, they sit currently as the third member of the Board of Rights, and also they sit as a single member on an administrative appeal by a police officer who is covered by the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Police Protective League. The numbers for those types of hearings, I will just give you as an example to give you some frame of reference. In 2017, there were 55 Board of Rights and 55 administrative appeal hearings. To date, in 2018, there have been 69 Board of Rights and 40 administrative appeal hearings. A Board of Rights is conducted when the Chief of Police recommends an officer for termination, demotion, or suspension. The officer has that as their mechanism to appeal that recommendation of the Chief of Police. Currently, that is made up of 2 command officers rank of captain or above and 1 civilian hearing examiner. On the administrative appeal process, the guidelines for an administrative appeal that a hearing examiner would adjudicate is a general dispute that may arise from a department-initiated transfer for purposes of punishment, discipline of 22 days or less involving tenured employees where the employee waives the Board of Rights and admits guilt to the offense. The appeal is limited to the degree of the penalty. Termination of entry-level probationary employees for misconduct involving a liberty interest. Categorical use of force adjudications resulting in administrative disapproval, extensive retraining, and non-categorical use of force adjudications resulting in administrative disapproval, verbal counseling, tactical debrief, or extensive retraining. Both of those processes are administrative in nature. However, if the hearing is adverse to the officer, they can choose to take it up on a writ to the Superior Court. So with all of that said, the current composition of our hearing examiners is made up of 37 people. 29 reside in the city. There are 17 males who are white, 4 males African American, 2 Hispanic males, 1 Asian American male, for a total of males of 24. Females are 10 white, 1 African American, 1 Hispanic, 1 Asian American, for a total of 13. So the recommendation, again, is to expand the Board of Rights to allow greater diversity, and we will need more members of the Board of Rights panel. So I met with the President and Vice President, with the City Attorney's Office, and from that, the following recommendations are presented for consideration to be forwarded to the City Council. Shall not have a criminal record that would impact their ability to act impartially as a Board of Rights panel member or conduct an administrative appeal hearing.
And what, can you say what the changes are in each of these to what's existing?
I can, sir.
Okay. If you do them at the same time, it makes it a little bit easier.
The first one I just read only adds the administrative appeal process.
Okay.
Should have a record of responsible community service. That does not change. Number 3, shall not presently be employed as a full-time law enforcement officer. That's the current. That is modified to shall not presently be employed as a peace officer if a former peace officer at least 1 year since their separation from their employing agency. Currently, preferably a resident of the City of Los Angeles, and that remains the same in the recommendations, preferably a resident of the City of Los Angeles. Currently, They shall have at least 7 years' experience with arbitration, mediation, or administrative hearings, or comparable work experience. Experience in human resources, labor relations, personnel relations, or employee discipline is preferred. That has been modified to should have at least 3 years' experience in human resources, personnel relations, labor relations, or personnel matters related to recommending, administrating, adjudicating, or reviewing the administration of discipline. The reason those last areas are important, again, for the Board of Rights, if an officer selects 3 administrative hearing officers, those individuals must be able to understand the process of progressive discipline, administration of discipline, etc. And on the administrative appeal side, they will be adjudicating by themselves. They must write a report with their findings and recommendations to the Chief of Police for his consideration. And again, as I mentioned earlier, in both those cases, the employee has the right, if the hearing is adverse to them, to take it to a writ of appeal to the Superior Court. The other area that was to be examined is the makeup and diversity of the body. And to increase that diversity, I would recommend that we go from our current 37, increase it by 20. If we need to have more, we can expand that base more, but giving us 20 additional to give us a base for the expansion of the pool initially. That we would advertise that position as a city employee position. It gets advertised on the city website, commission website, but we would also reach out to minority organizations and periodicals to give the opportunity for employment for that position. The compensation, which is established by city ordinance, is for less than 4 hours, $440 in a day. More than 4 hours in a single day, it is $900. The recommendation also is to have 2 members of the police commission be the screening committee, interview the applicants, and make recommendations to the full commission. And the full commission ultimately makes the decision on who they will employ. And since that is an employment matter, that would be considered in closed session with the results of that closed session hearing announced in public. That concludes the report. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
Commissioner, questions? Public comments?
We have 11.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. T. Fink. Can you just explain the sort of how the authority over discipline works in terms of, city council versus police commission versus police chief per the charter and other relevant policy, and how that relates to this particular decision being or recommendation being delegated to us as opposed to other matters related to Amendment C?
Absolutely. Discipline in the city of Los Angeles as relates to police officers is governed by Charter Section 1070. 1070 vests all authority for discipline of sworn police officers with the Chief of Police. The Board of Police Commissioners has no role or authority in the administration of discipline of police officers in the city of Los Angeles, nor does the Los Angeles City Council have a role. It totally vests with the Chief of Police. The appeal mechanism for an officer and the tribunal that determines an officer's guilt or innocence, should an officer choose to go to a Board of Rights, is the Board of Rights. The City Council's authority as it relates to the Board of Rights is to adopt the ordinance that implements the qualifications and the process, but not to override the chief's authority as it relates to discipline. And the reason that this came to the commission is because the commission employs the hearing examiners, and the council wished us to make some changes and gave some direction as to how they saw those changes taking effect.
Great, thank you. And can you share how you see this new criteria as helping us increase the diversity of the panels?
Well, I think the diversity of the panel would be increased by just, again, expanding the panel one way, and then also reaching out to organizations that might not have been reached out to in the past with a selective focus of affording them the opportunity and the information about the positions being available.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Public speaking? 11, you said?
13, sir.
13, let's go.
Okay, the first 3, Michael Novick, Melanie Ochoa, and Adam Smith.
Yes, since Mr. Teethank referred to the city charter amendment that put this into effect, I think we should look at that. That was a bait-and-switch charter amendment which presented itself as increased civilian oversight of the Los Angeles Police Department that was put forward by the Police Officers Union under a false flag, but it reflects the fact that the people in the city of Los Angeles do not believe that there is currently effective civilian oversight of the police department because of the failings of the LA Police Commission. So I think that that's the framework in which you need to think about this. If you're talking about requirements for membership, I think you should explicitly say that the makeup of this Board of Rights, these hearing examiners, should reflect the composition of the city of Los Angeles in terms of racial background, gender, economic class. I think that any restrictions that you put on it that will prevent that. I don't understand why, if the existing requirements say you must be a resident of the city of Los Angeles, that many of the members are not. So I think that the other thing you should put in as requirement is that anybody on this Board of Rights hearing commissioners should be required to attend training led by community-based organizations that deal with the questions of police abuse and authority, because the history of many of these things, and is evident in your own case, is that civilian oversight bodies are captured by the police department. The reason that the police union pushed for this measure is because when there were 2-to-1 votes on the 3-member Board of Rights, that would override the police chief's authority, it was always the civilian person who was for a more lenient punishment. And make clear to the public that the only power these boards have is to reduce the discipline of the police officers so charged. They have no ability to impose anything more severe than the police chief has already put in.
Michelle Ochoa.
Morning.
Melanie Ochoa with the ACLU. Last year, the department that this commission oversees killed 17 people, 34% unarmed. It has also cost the city more than $190 million in civil suit payouts for officer misconduct since 2005. This commission should be focused on finding ways to discourage misconduct by making sure that officers are actually held accountable when they use excessive force, fabricate evidence, and sexually harass. Instead, it has put forth a proposal to change the Board of Rights in a way that can only be intended to ensure that the panel of individuals evaluating police misconduct is the least likely to actually find officers guilty of misconduct and give them a punishment commensurate with their wrongdoing. From your Inspector General's reports, we know that officers complain about the Board of Rights being biased, unfair, blindly adhering to the chief's recommended discipline, and that the outcomes are based on rank and who the officer knows. But the board already refuses to terminate officers the chief wants to fire in over 50% of the cases it considers. There is also no evidence of bias by rank. Officers' complaints are either intentionally self-serving, they don't want any accountability for their wrongdoing, or based on their perceptions due to the mere inclusion of officers on the board. Even putting aside concerns of bias, which are huge, allowing ex-cops to serve on the board won't even address officers' concerns because they will still believe that connections determine outcomes. This proposal is simply not intended to solve any of the actual problems with the Board of Rights and solely intended to reduce officer accountability. The ACLU, BLM, and Community Coalition wrote a report detailing the history of the issues with the Board of Rights, including findings by the Christopher Commission, post-Ramparts reports by Connie Rice and Erin Chemerinsky, IG reports, and past chiefs who complained about the Board of Rights undermining officer discipline. That entire history was ignored with these recommendations, as were our evidence-based recommendations for amending the Board of Rights. Both Chemerinsky and Connie Rice endorsed the recommendations of ACLU, BLM, and COCO, which explicitly reject the idea of ex-cops as civilians on the Board of Rights. It is very disappointing to see the Commission try to move forward without engaging any of the history, facts, or recommendations of the many entities that have investigated the board.
Thank you.
And instead make a recommendation that will certainly lead to fewer officers being held accountable and more of your out-of-policy determinations being ignored.
Thank you.
Adam Smith, followed by Wayne and Andres Kwan.
We were provided the report.
It's my turn to talk, Steve.
No, it's not. We were sent the report. I can tell you for a fact, I did read the report. I read the report carefully, and my recommendations are taken within this context. So it wasn't without regard to your report that we made our recommendations. Go ahead, sir.
All right. It's kind of laughable that the police commission has any say so in the determination of like the definition of what civilian is. As this board is supposed to be the civilian oversight of the police department, it's obviously not that. I have no faith in any of these commissioners that have been there for years. So I'm speaking directly to Mr. Bonner and Ms. Decker and holding you responsible for what happens in this room moving forward. It's that my mother was a teacher for 30 years. You think a year after she retired, she's like, well, I don't consider myself a teacher anymore. I can go into a classroom and I'm not going to have any bias as to how things operate. It's really laughable that you all are even considering that as a stipulation to this, or like a update to this, what makes a civilian for the Board of Rights. And the part about the city of Los Angeles, someone should live in the city of Los Angeles. Yeah, probably a good idea. And it makes me think, I wonder if Chief Moore, who, you all are talking about, has the final say so in disciplining officers in front of the Board of Rights. Chief Moore said when he got hired, if he got hired last year, he was going to move back to Los Angeles because he didn't currently live in Los Angeles. I'm wondering if he did that. All right. Well, that's a start, I guess.
Wayne, followed by Andres Kwan.
Yeah, so Chief Moore had to wait to move back here after he got his $1.25 drop payoff. Now he can have a nice house now, so that's why he had to wait. Makes sense to me. So, I used to be one of these examiners long ago. Late 80s, early 90s, I used to be an examiner. So what you got, you don't have examiners, you have puppets, a list of puppets. And what they do is they're so honored to come into the ivory tower and get a little badge pin that says Police Commission. And then they tell all their friends on the weekends, I'm a hearing examiner. I have exclusive access to City Hall and the police chief's suite upstairs. So all of that for what? $400 a day? $900? Is that what you pay professional people in 2018? What a fucking joke that payment is. You got to pay people the right thing. This takes a lot of work. But if they're just going to be here just to affirm misconduct, then it's no point, right? So I got some good names for you. I think former police Charlie Beck would make a good hearing examiner. Jim McDonald will be available after he got his ass reamed by Mr. Villanueva. Detective Furman, remember him? He's a terrific officer. Daryl Gates. Yes, these are examples of former police officers that you can now select as hearing commissioners. That's a good idea, right? It's a real good idea to have the problem review the problem so you can continue the problem. Yes, sir. And Mr. Bonner knows that. And Eileen Decker has an intimate familiarity with the right people to select, especially when you select grand juries. She does a good job.
Next.
Andres Kwan, Paula Miner, and Gina Viola.
Morning, sir.
Andres Kwan, lawyer with the ACLU. With my 2 minutes here, I want to emphasize the importance of real diversity, of replacing the civilians currently in the Board of Rights with individuals who reflect the diverse lived experiences of us Angelinos, and not merely those who are in line with the LAPD. Again, I repeat, real diversity, including diversity of experience, because whatever ounce of trust the Board of Rights may still have, and there isn't much, or actually any at all, is on the line. But here's the thing, filling these civilian spots with retired officers is going completely in the wrong direction. Commissioners, that is the worst possible option. If you're a reasonably thinking person, bias is what jumps out at you. This move will do nothing but undermine the public's faith in the LAPD disciplinary process, that it can ever be impartial, that it can actually hold officers accountable when it must, that it's not filled with bias in favor of officers. In addition, the criteria and selection process are incredibly vague. For example, why do you presume that people with criminal records may have bias? That is disqualifying, but that ex-officers or people with connections to police don't? Or how do you determine that running with an officer would lead to insurmountable bias? Please tell us. Personally, I have a criminal record myself. And I'm now a member of the California Bar. I'm a lawyer, but I can't serve on this board? That, commissioners, is preposterous. We need to finally create a pool of civilians that is not intent of granting officers leniency, no matter the cost, no matter how egregious their conduct, no matter the erosion of trust, without bias. Limiting civilian participants to actual civilians who have no post, no past or current affiliation or financial ties to the department is the only non-biased solution here. And there's absolutely no need to limit the civilian pool only to HR professionals or mediators. There's no known or actual benefit from the supposed expertise of HR professionals. The duty here is the same as any jury. The same. But we don't limit juries to HR professionals, do we?
Thank you, sir.
Paula Miner, followed by Gina Viola and Zach Sherwin.
I agree with the comments that were made by our colleague from the ACLU. I also am concerned about the board. It's my understanding that officers do get to participate in the selection of who from that 39 or whatever number it is that will be on their board if they have a particular hearing. When we reviewed the changes that are recommended today from the requirements that were in the past, it seemed that adding retired police officers who have at least 1 year was one of the most significant differences between the two recommendations, besides the change for the personnel experience from 7 to 3 years. I think that adding, even when in your own report you use the word cooling off period, that raises questions. What are the retired officers cooling off from? And how do we know that whatever it is has cooled in 1 year? I think that adding that particular clause that adds retired officers dilutes the intention of this particular board and changes the nature of it being civilian.
Next speaker.
Gina Viola.
I too was going to point out the cooling off period that stuck out to me and was repeated more than once. At the risk of stating the obvious, putting somebody in charge of a job when they have a conflict of interest, often used to refer to industry self-regulation or to put an industry insider on the board that regulates the industry. For example, appointing an executive of Comcast as chairman of the FCC, setting the fox to guard the hen house. The fox guarding the hen house describes a set of circumstances in which someone who should not be trusted has been chosen to protect someone or oversee a situation. The choice involves someone directly unsuitable for the task, such as choosing a bank robber to guard a bank. You've admitted you don't want people with a criminal record on this board, yet you want police on this board. That makes no sense at all. That is quintessential fox guarding the hen house, an expression that has been around since the 1500s and used in a variety of means. I'm beside myself that this change would be considered, included. I can say I'm not surprised coming to these meetings, as I have been now for quite some time. This does not surprise me, but it shocks me and it upsets me. It angers me. It has me completely out of the Christmas spirit. So when I hear about the war on Christmas, I think, who commits the war on Christmas? Stuff like this. Stuff like this. You cannot adopt this as policy today. And I know when I go and sit down and I'm going to listen to my colleagues and I'm going to be so proud of everything they say, that you are going to first, second, and I as quickly as you can, unanimously. So I know this. That's not.
Next speaker, please.
Zach Sherwin, followed by Laura Smith and Audrey George.
Guys, former cops should not be disciplining cops. It's just common sense. It doesn't pass the smell test on a basic level. A child should be able to grasp this. I, too, want to talk about the cooling off period language, and everybody's bringing it up, and that's not because we're being redundant or repetitive, but because it's a blatant thing to notice that needs to be mentioned again and again. As Paula said, you know, this implies that a career as a police officer is something to cool off from. I don't doubt that. In fact, I can imagine that depending on your particular experiences, a year wouldn't be enough to cool off. That might be something that a lifetime wouldn't be enough for. You cool off from a jog, not a job. It is straight up doublespeak to articulate a goal of having more civilians preside over these hearings and then to allow former cops to be part of those panels as the civilians. Again, on a common sense level, it's just a bad look. It has the stench of funny business about it. If you want to make the person on the panel, the people on the panel civilians, make them real civilians. Also, applicants can't have a criminal record that would impact their ability to act impartially as a Board of Rights member. Former cops can be on the panels. Maybe some of those retired cops would have criminal records, rendering them ineligible if the panels weren't so lenient. And finally, on page 2 of Mr. Tiefank's report, we saw a table with the demographics. I noticed that there are nearly twice as many men as women in the current pool. Also, we don't see how many people are residents of the city, and also how many are former police officers. I just wanted to kind of put a flag on that we see some of the statistics speaking to the diversity question, but not the city residents question and the former police officers question. If you said to a kid, you're going to get in trouble, and the people who determine your punishment are going to be your parents and another kid for fairness, and then that third person was an adult who, because they were a former kid, it's just laughable. It doesn't pass on a common sense level. I want these people to smile, and I don't want you to smile. It's a serious matter, and I don't want to make light of it.
Next speaker.
Laura Smith, followed by Audrey George, Michael Williams.
Yeah, I know. Hey, it doesn't matter what you say. You want to jump in and say it?
I know that Zach, my colleague, takes this, really cares about this, and I'm not sure what that comment really served. I'm here to ask you,
Mr. Spindler, did I give you a just a minute. Did I give you a final warning before I forgot? Okay, so this is your so this is your final warning. So this is your final warning. Okay, go ahead.
Could I please have my clock reset?
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm here to ask you to vote no on this moving forward today until modifications have been made. There are a variety of ways that we can think about diversity. I agree that there should the composition of the city in terms of race, gender, socioeconomic background, experience, that should be reflected in the makeup. I believe that, and I believe that language should be written to require that. But more specifically, when we think about diversity in terms of disciplining the police, to me, it seems absurd that you would include language that would allow police to be involved in that process. When we think about the composition of the city and what percent of people are police, in my opinion, there are too many. But the vast majority of Angelenos are not police officers, and there is no reason why there should be a problem finding qualified people for this board who are not involved with the police. One thing that stands out to me is that if we're selecting a jury, a connection to police is a red flag in someone serving on that jury, and I see no reason why former officers should be allowed.
Next speaker, please.
Audrey George.
Ms. George, before you begin, may I ask Mr. Teefank just a follow-up question based on some of the comments made? It was my understanding City Council asked for criteria that would allow former police officers to serve on the panel because they current police officers currently serve on the panel. And is that accurate, or could you clarify?
Sure, I'll be happy to, Commissioner. The action that was a recommendation from the ad hoc committee on police reform, which was adopted by the City Council, is specifically addresses the issues as it relates to the commission that are before you today. Again, I will read them. Request the Police Commission, with the assistance of the City Attorney, to make changes to the qualifications for civilian hearing examiners, including enhancing diversity, increasing the number of city residents, and allowing for the inclusion of retired command staff police officers, which would require a minimum 1-year cooling off period for retired LAPD command staff. That is the direction that was
language
adopted.
Came from City Council.
Yes, ma'am. That is the City Council's language. In the report that I prepared, I did not use the term cooling off. I used the term separation from their prior employing agency.
So the recommendations are to address what council requested.
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
I'm sorry, Ms. George, to interrupt you, but I just want to be sure that we kind of have a clear understanding, which I'm sure many of the prior speakers did, but I just want to be sure I wasn't confused, so thank you.
And if I could, just one other point, one of the speakers mentioned about the residency within the city. It is in the report, and I did mention, I think, in my comments, there currently are 37 hearing examiners, 29 of which reside in the city of Los Angeles.
And I have a follow-up question as well related to some of the comments that we heard. So there sounds like there's the impression that people with a criminal record would be prohibited from participating, but my interpretation of this is that it would be taken into account only if the Board of Police Commissioners felt that it would impact their ability to serve. Can you share kind of that nuance and distinction?
Sure, you are correct. A person with a criminal background could apply and could be selected as a hearing examiner. I think the piece here is, what was that conviction for? If that conviction was for assault on a police officer, if that conviction was for resisting and obstructing a police officer, if that conviction was for those type of activities that would directly impact interactions with an officer, I think minor offenses that occurred in the past, when that could be dealt with and explained, those would be exceptions.
Thank you.
And that criteria has been here since the early 1990s. It is not a new criteria.
Ms. George. Thank you.
So the reason that we are talking about these enabling ordinances for the Board of Rights for any reason is because Charter Measure C passed, as Mr. Teefank suggested. As background for the two newest commissioners, in case you are not aware, Measure C only passed because it was a shady backroom deal between the mayor and the Police Protective League, because the community only even knew about it a week and a half or 2 weeks in advance of it having to people voting for it in the city, and had very little time to communicate the opposition to that. Should never have passed. So now we're talking about this enabling ordinance, and I so strongly object to having retired officers be considered for this board. Once a cop, always a cop. There isn't any police officer who's retired who wouldn't still consider active officers to be his brothers and sisters in blue, who wouldn't stand up and say Blue Lives Matter. The decision to become a police officer in the first place does reflect a certain worldview, a choice of how you see things. Those people should not be on a board disciplining other police officers. We all know, as we talk about over and over, because we consider this police commission to be part of the LAPD, that officers should not be reviewing, investigating, disciplining, auditing other police officers. It's just wrong on so many levels, and I hope to see at least one person vote against approval of this.
Michael Williams, followed by Hamid Khan and Dr. Melina Abdullah.
Let's talk about the blue wall of silence. So according to the Huffington Post, in the cases of Walter Scott, Keith Scott, Terrence Crutcher, if you don't know these cases, these are all cases where police were found to have either removed evidence from the scene or lied about an encounter with the suspect. They found that no police officers, not a single one, came forward to tell the truth about what actually happened in that incident. Also, according to the National Institute of Ethics, in a study commissioned by the International Association of Police Chiefs, that's y'all, said that a study that did in 21 states of hundreds of officers in 21 states found that they had nearly 80% of cops admit that there was a code of silence that existed within the police department. They also found that more than half said that the code of silence didn't bother them. And these are the people, these retired officers, that you want to put on a board that's supposed to be deciding whether or not someone has done criminal action or needs discipline action. This is studies that you guys don't read because you guys don't want to face facts and truth. And I know people are coming up here and asking you for things, but I'm not asking for anything. I'm telling the audience here what the reality is that police officers have a code of silence called the Blue Wall of Silence that they do not tell on each other, that they protect each other even when they know that the other has done wrong. And this code of silence goes way beyond when they leave the police department. This goes on until the day they die because they believe that they're a police officer until the day that they die, even after retirement. And these are the people that you're putting onto this board. So go ahead and improve it. Go ahead and make sure. But I want the audience and the community to know what is actually happening and what is actually going on.
Hamid Khan.
Thank you, Michael, for reminding us, because let's be very clear about this bogus police reform concept, that whether it's the Board of Rights, whether it's the Board of Discipline, whether it's the Board of Appeals, whether it's the Board of Police Commissioner, it's the same old clusterfuck that we are dealing with. This is classic City Hall, Herb Wesson kind of bullshit, that you start something, and which is also very ironic, and I'm looking at Michael Moore, because there was such a strong opposition from the people at Measure C, and this was, we saw it as an end run around the power of the chief himself. And this was kind of ironic as well, that almost kind of opposing something and trying to protect the powers of the chief. So this is how all these legislations, and this is how policy is written. But ultimately what it comes down to, this is a gift of the Police Protective League. This is a gift like any other gift. One of the most powerful organizations in the city of Los Angeles, one of the most powerful organizations in the state of California, that protects murderers, that protects liars, that protects conspirators, that protects people who are child sexual predators. So I think we need to have that rather than appealing. We've seen that, what these people are going to do. Let's just be very clear that what we are fighting and what we are up against. It's yet another rubber stamping body, whether somebody has served as a cop or not, whether somebody is going to cool off, whether somebody is going to warm up and heat up. It's the same old bullshit. So our fight is not about the cooling off period or the warming off period. It's the same thing, same bullshit that we see, and these people are going to be rubber stamping it. So let's make sure that abolition is real. I mean, let's invoke Connie Rice's legacy, who has a private parking spot because she was so close to Bill Bratton as well. So we don't put our trust in any of that garbage.
Dr. Melina Abdullah.
So we all know exactly what's going to happen. We're going to finish public comment, and then unanimously you're going to vote in favor of this report. But we just want to put it on record what is happening, right? That what you're about to approve is that police get to decide the fate of police who have already been found guilty of misconduct. These are the cops who've already been gone through the internal investigation process and found guilty of misconduct, and now we're going to stack the deck even further. We also want to be clear about how this happened, right? So it's absolutely Herb Wesson, but it's also Eric Garcetti. This is a game of politics where they are horse trading, right? It's really clear what you all are doing. Measure C passed in May 2017. You took a year and a half. City Council took a year and a half to now implement it. Why? Because Mayor Garcetti thinks he's going to be president, right? And then everybody else is jockeying for position. This is a giveaway to police unions, right? The police union asked for this. Eric Garcetti is showing he can deliver. You all are all appointed by Eric Garcetti, right? Measure C was put on the ballot in a misleading way, sold as a civilian oversight. No one was engaged. We didn't find out till a couple weeks before. And then after we engaged in the process, we actually got voters who went and voted on election day. 60% of them voted against Measure C, despite the police union spending $1.5 million to get it passed, right? So we got to be clear that this is a report that they told you to write. You're using what they said. You're even expanding it, right? And you're not even giving any rationale. So you have a choice. Are you going to just do...
Next speaker, please.
The final speaker is Sheila.
Sheila? Next speaker. You can come back during public comment and speak during public comment, but now your time's up, so come back during public comment. Thank you.
I just want to genuinely ask, how can you expect any degree of impartiality to help deliver any resemblance of justice for those harmed and killed, for their families, or for the communities that they come from, when a former police officer, after this laughable cooling off period, or whatever it is that you would like to call it, can serve on this board just 1 year after they have left the force? The idea of them serving at all, ever, in any capacity is disturbing at best. Sorry, I just lost my place. Once they have walked that thin blue line of injustice, they are not a civilian. They are not suitable to serve on this board. Then add this bogus time limit. 1 year later, they still have tight-knit relationships with people on the force. One which might be a person in question, or a friend of a relative. All of this in a city that has a history of bias, bigotry, abuse, oppression, and murder. I am disgusted, and I hope that you do the right thing for once. But I know you will likely vote unanimously to approve this. Please do the right thing for once.
We have no other cards on this item, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any commissioner comments? Chief, comments?
So no, just in summary, let me just first of all apologize to the gentleman. I was laughing at your remark, not in regards to this event, but frankly as the analogy you rose. It wasn't meant to be disrespectful to you. It was meant to show I was just paying attention. As to this event, as to what's before this commission, I think the points that have been made are well-founded, and at the same time, I also understand the role of the commission in relationship to the city council and what's been asked of this commission. And I welcome your deliberation of this and coming to determination of who these civilian members should be, and the importance that the review and consideration in the appointment of these individuals is extremely critical to our ability as a department and as an agency and as a city to properly and fairly evaluate the actions of officers who, whether directed by me to a Board of Rights or elected to hear the matter before a Board of Rights for sustained acts or recommended sustained act of misconduct, that the tribunal be made up of individuals who are fair, knowledgeable, and will treat all sides and make their findings based on the evidence to build the public's confidence that, and the officers, that the administration of discipline in this department is fair, anticipable, and responsible and certain. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, if I may also, this is a recommendation in response to the council request of you. The council will take the final action on any adoption, so they may choose to modify the recommendations that go forward or adopt them. That is their purview.
Exactly correct. Okay, maybe we have a motion for...
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Bonner?
One, so you addressed kind of the where this goes procedurally. One, on the criteria, we've talked a lot and we've heard a lot about the issue of allowing former police officers to meet one of the minimum criteria. There's also, if I'm reading this correctly, one that you have to have at least 3 years experience in human resources, personnel relations, and labor relations. Can you speak a little bit about how those two are reconciled? In other words, it sounds to me like what you would have is not only a former police officer, but someone who was also involved in adjudicating these kinds of matters while they were employed by the police department.
Yes, sir. The requirements would be for anyone who would be considered, but if they were a police officer, they would have to meet those requirements of having had at least 3 years in experience in personnel relations, in administering discipline, adjudicating discipline, evaluating discipline, or labor relations. So some activity involving the area of discipline and understanding the purpose of discipline, understanding progressive discipline, understanding how discipline is imposed in an organization in a fair and impartial manner. So anyone would have to have those requirements.
Any member of the public as well?
Anyone who applied to be a member of the Board of Rights would have to have those requirements. That is just not specific to a former police officer.
And what is this is a discussion of the minimum requirements. What is speak a little bit more about the actual selection process?
So the selection process, as I have identified in here, a person would make application. As I said, it's considered a part-time as-needed city employment position. They fill out an application. The application would come forward. There would be 2 members of your body. The commission would do the review of those applications and do the interviews of those individuals. And if they felt that they possessed the necessary qualifications to go forward, they would recommend to the full panel. And then just in closed session, you all would evaluate and make a decision to employ them or not employment.
That's how the 37 that are in the pool
37
now?
were selected, and the new ones would be in that same manner.
Mm-hmm. And so so one could do both comply with the city council's request on the one hand for the criteria, but could nonetheless make a determination not to include a former officer if they were presented along with a list of other qualified candidates.
Well, the request from the council was specific to having a former police officer.
So I understand that. I think what I'm saying is, assume we comply with the council's request and we send this forward. Mm-hmm. But if any of us had a view as well that you were disinclined to include a former officer on a panel, you could nonetheless address that at the point of selection.
Absolutely, you could.
Right.
Absolutely, yes.
That's what
that
I'm
would
saying.
be the
So
place.
that's where I'm saying the responsibility may really come with who we actually select to put on panels, not who the council's asked or how the council's asked us to articulate the minimum criteria.
You're absolutely correct. And let me just explain one thing. There were a couple of folks that asked this, and I will explain the process for selection of a hearing examiner. The way that occurs today is that with the one member of the panel today, there are 3 names that are provided, and those names are chosen at lot. So when we get a call that the department is looking for a hearing examiner for a specific date, my staff will draw from a box. Basically, it is a box with numbers, 3 numbers. We then will take and provide the names of those to the department and to the officer's representation. They will flip a coin, and whoever wins the call gets the first strike. The next party gets the next strike, and the person remaining remains in the pool.
I think my question would relate then to how, because that's how you select people from the pool.
That's correct.
I think my question probably goes to selecting people to be included in the pool.
And that would be certainly a commission choice. So, again, to expand on your question, you had a person come forward who was a former peace officer, and there was discussion, there was a decision made not to employ that person. That's a commission call.
That just means that you address that at the point of who you're including in the pool.
Who you're going to employ, because you're going to employ them as an employee.
Thank you.
Can you also explain, Mr. Tiefenk, the distinction between what was originally in the City Council direction about retired command officers and the recommendation before us for any retired police officer?
Sure. The rationale for that is that if you're looking at just Los Angeles Police Command officers, you're limiting that pool of former peace officers. And so by expanding it to be any retired peace officer, you would have to have those qualifications that we just talked about, and you could be from any police department. So you could be a retired chief of police from X police department and live in the city of Los Angeles, and you would have a great deal of experience because in your role in a municipal police department, you would impose far more discipline than someone who was a member of a command staff at LAPD.
Okay.
Because of the role that you have. So your experience in your role would play into that. That's why that recommendation is broad beyond the LAPD command staff only.
Right. The key being that they have experience actually
Absolutely
adjudicating, recommending.
They would
discipline,
have to
et
have
cetera.
that experience that is in that last paragraph that we just spoke about.
Any other questions? Okay, may we have a motion for, is there a motion for approval of the executive director's report per the city council's requirement and transmit back to the city council ad hoc committee on police reform?
Yes, I will move it.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to item number C. We'll go to item number C. I want to go to C and F collectively. Are there any commissioner comments or public comments on items C or F?
We have one comment card on C and we have two on F.
Okay. Do we have any commissioner comments on either C or F? Let's take the public comment card on C.
Okay.
Did you say there were one or two?
One.
Okay.
We have Wayne on 2C.
This is on uncollectible false alarm receivables.
I mean, this is the most important issue on the agenda. Uncollectible false alarm receivables. And it goes back from October 2014 to December 31st, 2014. This is, Mr. Tiefenk has spent weeks on this report. Now, what are we going to do? These are all business owners, and these are people, most of them have donated to the city councilman's funds. Most of them have paid off the building inspectors. We've looked at that. So therefore, they're asking you to give them a waiver of their false alarm receivables by calling it uncollectible, which of course it really is collectible. All you have to do is suspend their business license and they'll pay it to you in 5 minutes, but that's not what Herb Wesson wants. And that's not what Jose Huizar wants. What we want at this Christmas time of the year, and for some of those like Soberov, Hanukkah gifts, is to give back these as uncollectibles. Now, of course, we could collect it, but that just would be inconsistent with the current policy. And I especially like Eileen Decker's amendments to this. She would like to make this an annual ripoff of the taxpayers. She would like to move it up to 2017 and then 2018. And Mr. Bonner's amendment is actually to go forthwith to 2019 in advance, so that basically we can have all the false alarms you want and you don't have to pay anything because it'll be uncollectible. So now Sandra Figueroa, she went back there and got her free meal because, you know, she comes here to get her free meal every Tuesday. So she'll move the motion after filling her big fat gullet with more of that free food. If you can, bring me a sandwich. I like ham and
Next speaker.
We have no other speakers on this item, sir.
Motion for approval. I'll move approval. You have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. Let's go to item number F. Did you say there was a speaker to that?
We have two speakers. We have Wayne and we have Mr. Novick.
Okay. Spindler? This is number F.
Yeah, that Novik's getting aggressive. Okay. So we're getting here. Let's see. The supplemental police account. Well, yesterday, unfortunately for me, I had to attend the Budget and Finance Committee, ran by Paul the Goat Krikorian. A shout out to him. The man with a suspended bar license that wants to run for city attorney. Look it up. So we have the supplemental police account. Now, there's another supplemental account, which you're not aware of, the $68.4 million of overtime that the city is being given to the police department for that fucked up little Metro account that we have. Remember we took over?
Off topic.
Well,
Topic.
we have police
warning.
accounts. Oh, you get so fucking bitchy, don't you, when I mention these things? Yes, Eileen, he gets real ticked off. See, because police accounts are undefined, supplemental police accounts. Can't we use that for any overtime-related activities? Sure we can. How much is it? We don't know. They took and they fucked us for $68 million in overtime. Now they want a supplemental police account report. What a fucking joke. Absolute joke. Bonner, Decker, don't get indicted like Jose Huizar. So please vote no on F. You look like nice people, but I'll tell you something. Eileen Decker would make a beautiful prison bitch, and I'll tell you, and so would Bonner. So
Off topic. Your time's over. Sit down, will you, please?
The next speaker, please, Mr. Novick.
Yeah, I'd like to urge a no vote on this report. I think that people need to understand that coming and going, this money is improper. The supplemental police account is money that's obtained from confiscations of drugs and cars and other property that are turned over to the police department for its use. I think that's improper. They're often carried out even without criminal proceedings or convictions.
Spindler, you're disrupting the meeting. You can ask him. He can leave now. Mr. Spindler, you're out. Yeah, I know. It's blocking, and it's disrupting the meeting. I think it's disrupting, and I think you leave, and it's not your decision. Sir? Guys, he's out.
Can you restore my time?
Yeah, you need to restore his time.
Thank you.
You don't like that $68 million you stole, huh? Well,
Go ahead.
Let the record reflect Mr. Spindler continues to disrupt the meeting. The meeting cannot proceed until he leaves the room.
I'm getting my thing out, but you know what? The FBI wants to know.
Spindler, you can leave the room, please.
Mr. Spindler continues to disrupt the meeting as he's leaving the room, sir, for the record.
Good for you, Spindler. Okay.
All right, so again, this is a supplemental police account because it's on top of the regular budget that comes from taxpayer funds that supports the department. It's $1.5 million provided to the police department from the asset forfeiture trust fund. Those asset forfeitures, I think, as I say, are improper. You're taking the property of people without any kind of court proceedings. They're forfeited because of suspected drug activity and other things. So I think the money coming into that fund is improper. The money going out is used to pay for snitches and informants, and I think that's also improper. You're trying to create disunity in the community and create an incentive for people to criminalize their neighbors, and I think that the whole thing is a scandal and should be stopped.
And we have no other comment cards on 2F.
I'll move approval of 2F. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Let's go back to item 2D. Are there any commissioner questions of the department or of the report?
I would just ask.
So let's have the department come forward.
No, I'm just going to ask Mr. Tiefank if he wouldn't mind with a follow-up to either the audit division or the appropriate division to find out the status of recommendations and get a report back just generally. I note in this report there was a lengthy period of time in implementing the recommendations. If we could just have that in the future, I'd appreciate it.
Excuse me, Mr. Phillips is in the audience. I believe they can answer it right now for you, ma'am.
Oh, okay, very well.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Thomas. I'm Commanding Officer of Policies and Procedures Division.
Morning.
Good morning. In regards to recommendation 1 and 2, we are actually our post e-review, so we just got that back, and we're going to make some edits, and it's going to go up the chain for approval and publishing.
Okay, I hope you understand my concern that it's been a number of years since the prior report, and it seemed that these were more administrative recommendations. There might be more to it, of course, but my concern was that it's taken 3 or 4 years to implement those prior recommendations, and I just want to be sure that as a department, that's not something we fall into.
You're right. It's been a few years, and what had happened was we had combined that recommendation into another project we're working on without realizing it was going to take this long. So earlier this year, what we've done is we separate the 2 projects, and we are implementing those 2 recommendations and continue to work on another project that is finishing up also.
Okay, I'd like to have some follow-up on this at a future meeting, but I don't think it impedes our ability to move forward with this particular audit.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
We have public comment on item 2D.
We have one. We have Mr. Novick.
Novick? Thank you.
It's a brief comment. I think that if you're planning your audits, you need to think seriously about auditing many, many other things besides just financial matters. And I think that many of the audits that are carried out missed the
I think
forest
you're talking
for the
about
trees.
2E. Are you sure you're not on 2E? Because we haven't done 2E yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is D?
Yeah.
You're talking about, okay, yeah. Sorry. My bad.
Okay.
So this is relative to the gang enforcement detail selection criteria
sir.
audit, that particular audit. I think that if you're determining criteria for selecting people for a gang enforcement detail, you need to look very carefully at the history of all previous so-called gang suppression activities by the LAPD, like the crash units. And I think that the whole process involved is part of the predictive policing techniques of the LAPD, stigmatizing and criminalizing people for their associations, their family ties, their other activities. And I think that the gang enforcement detail should probably be disbanded.
We have no other cards on this item.
Motion for approval of item number 2D, please. So I'll move it. Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, let's go to item number 2E, please.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. So before you have the annual audit plan and the audit charter. With regard to the audit charter, it serves as a framework and highlights our mission, our independence, in particular where we lie in the organizational structure, the fact that we follow generally accepted government auditing standards, our authorization and responsibilities, as well as the reporting structure once we're done with the audits. This charter is presented on a biannual basis and serves to be informative to department personnel as well as the public. And it also satisfies requirements set forth by the generally accepted government auditing standards. Are there any particular questions with regard to the audit charter?
I have a general question. Most of these are new. They haven't been done before. And the process for getting something on the list is what?
Yes. So with regard to the annual audit plan, for the first 9 years, the annual audit plan was essentially written for us by the consent decree. We did audits that were mandated within the consent decree. Post-consent decree, we started doing a department risk assessment, which entailed looking at previous audits, the results of previous audits, new policy and procedure or policy and procedure that has been updated, looking at external audits that were conducted perhaps by the state, by the federal government, or even by the controller's office. We also conduct interviews with key stakeholders, including the Inspector General And the Police Commission, which this year we spoke to via the Executive Director. One of the things that we also did this year, we formed an internal work group at Audit Division, and we asked ourselves, how is it that we've been conducting these audits? And for all intents and purposes, we've always focused highly on compliance. And to a great degree for good reason. When we look at law enforcement agencies, certainly ourselves, but across the board, nationwide, and why they fall into consent decrees or get themselves in trouble, certainly not following your own policy and procedures is something that get law enforcement agencies into trouble. However, one of the things that we want to really start looking at incorporating is a more holistic approach and looking at providing just useful information for department command staff for their decision making, as well as looking at overall efficacy of operational procedures.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioners?
Just to, it's still a little bit unclear to me, what is our opportunity to influence either the scope or what's in the audit plan or the scope of any particular audit?
When you say you as police commissioners?
Yeah, so sometimes we hear the presentation of the audit report after the fact, and of course you're only looking at what you decided to look at. So the question is, what is the Commission's opportunity to influence either what's included in the audit plan or the scope of any particular audit?
Well, believe it or not, your influence is ongoing with the feedback that the Commission provides with all the audits. We take note of those things, but a request was made through the Executive Director for your input.
Do you want to, Richard, do you have anything to add to that? So I appreciate the response from your perspective, but just give us a little explanation as to really how does the Commission comment on the scope
Sure.
or on the audit plan for the ensuing years?
We're putting
and
something
also,
on the list.
Yeah.
I think, well, let me address it in two ways. One, the area about the influencing of the audits. Every time you make a comment on an audit today, they keep note of that, of the things that you have identified. So if you have an audit before you, like you had the gang selection audit, let's say there was something in that audit that you thought should have been there that was not there. Those comments will influence what they would look at as they would go do that audit next time. As it relates to the input on this audit plan that came forward, what I generally do is send out an email to the existing commissioners that they want to meet. If you're available to meet with them, you meet with them. They've done this before the two of you came onto the commission. So next year when the audit plan comes forward, that would be that opportunity. If there's things here that you want to adjust or suggest other audits, I would suggest that you might do that now, or you could also ask your colleagues to postpone it and have a meeting with Mr. Phillips and give some other areas that you would like to have audited.
And I think that's a good point. We have to keep in mind that this is an annual audit plan. It's not set in stone. It's flexible. And certainly if there's, and sometimes and oftentimes, in fact, things do come up throughout the year that are on the radar, and we go ahead and conduct the audit. That may have not been previously wasn't on the annual audit plan.
And do we receive information as to when the audit is starting? So in other words, let me just give you an example. So one of the items is 27 relative to the body worn and digital in-car video audit that is slated for 2019. So sitting here today, it's an area of interest. I couldn't delineate 3 or 4 specific things I might want to make sure you look at. So one, how would we know when you're gearing up to undertake the audit so that we could comment on the front end and not in the context of a commission meeting as to what we would might want you to cover?
Well, Commissioner, to be honest with you, that's not something that really has ever come up. We try to be strategic with how or when we conduct some of these audits, depending upon our personnel availability, depending on. So, for example, if there is something that was put in place recently, we will go ahead and hold off on conducting an audit until it has been in place for some time, so we actually have something to audit. But we've never had a process to advise a police commission when we're ramping up to do an audit, and that's not to say that we can't actually put something in place. We certainly can do that.
I think I don't want to say what I think your question is, but what comes to my mind is what if Commissioner Bonner or anybody has a question? Hey, you're going to be doing this audit. I see it. It's noticed here for next year. What's it going to include? And I have some ideas of other things it might include. Have you thought about them? Is that a possibility to?
Right.
How does that work in this process?
Right. Well, it's again, it's not something that has ever been asked of us, but I think it's something that we can do. I can go ahead and communicate with Mr. T-Fank, and I'm thinking anytime that starting 2019, moving forward, anytime that we get ready to conduct an audit, I give him a list of what audits we're going to be doing starting in January or February, and he can go ahead and share that information with the police commission. And if any of you want to meet, I would be more than happy to meet with you and get some insight.
Just you could meet one-on-one.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And just for clarity, this is a 2-year audit plan, right? Not an annual audit plan. Is that?
We refer to it as an annual audit plan. We break it up as to these are the audits for 2019, these are the audits for 2020. We like to do it 2 years at a time because it gives us some flexibility. Again, depending on some things that may be happening, we might push an audit to 2020 and bring one from 2020 to 2019.
And I understand. I just want to be sure that we're all clear. We're approving the topics for the next 2 years.
Yeah, you see my point that it's difficult to sit here today to imagine
Of
what
course.
issues we may deem more worthy of audit.
Yes. Typically, one of the other things that we do is again, I reach out to Mr. T-Fank towards the end of the year on anything that the commission may be interested. Again, it's a plan, and it can be changed.
Is this a rolling plan? In other words, will you do another one year from now for the year 2020-21? Or is this done every 2 years?
It's done every 2 years, but typically what happens is that we will go ahead and update the annual audit plan, whether because it's something that we needed to change around or because a commission, there's an interest with a commission.
So I will say I was slightly concerned by something you said earlier that with respect to the consent decree items, that in the past you were focused on the consent decree items, which was appropriate, but that perhaps those items have now fallen off the list completely. So I'd like you to just clarify that a little bit.
No, ma'am. We still conduct audits that were consent decree driven. However, we don't do it on an annual basis because what we have seen is an obvious improvement with regard to those areas. Gang operations. We looked at gang operations on an annual basis from different perspectives, not only the GED selection criteria audit, but an arrest booking and charging audit dedicated just to gang operations. And then, of course, Office of Operations was looking at, I mean, they really outshined everybody for a while. And they still do. They do very well because there's still a focus on GEDs. But
and I appreciate that you clarified that point, and I just wanted to be sure that the record was clear on that. But I do think this highlights my concern from earlier in making sure the recommendations have been implemented. So I'll talk to Mr. T-Fank about following up on that to make sure all your recommendations have been implemented.
Well, with regard to recommendations, you will be seeing, we do a biannual status of recommendations. So in June, or very shortly thereafter, you will see a report that outlines for the January through June, the status of recommendations. And what you will be seeing in the very near future, late this month, early January, is a status of recommendations that go from July through December. Mm-hmm. That's done twice a year, and we reach out to all the responsible entities that have standing recommendations, get their update as to where they are with these things. If they're implemented, we go ahead and show that they're implemented. We will do our due diligence in trying to see how it is that it was implemented. But you do get a report twice a year. You're welcome.
Okay. Do we have any public comments on?
We have none, sir, on this item.
Did Novick, did you want to give your speech about E? Okay. We have a motion for approval of the department's report. Thank you for the clarifications, and the discussion's interesting and important. Okay, we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, let's go to the report of the chief. Morning, chief. Still morning, I think. Yep.
Commissioners, good morning. As customary, I'll talk first about significant events. During this last period of time, we've had no categorical uses of force. As far as meetings, outreach, engagement with the communities, we had a number of those type of functions, including last Wednesday, a cross-section of all of our community forums, and where we continue discussions, question and answers on various topics of interest, from immigrations, LGBTQ developments as far as our training and education. So it was a good cross-section. It was a rainy night, and I was proud of the Angelenos, the leaderships, the stakeholders that found their way there. We met for a couple hours. The following day, a meeting that was sponsored by and organized by the Office of Operations Assistant Chief Arcos, we met with the Latino Leadership Summit. It was a group of council generals from Latin America. We were joined by Sheriff Assistant Chief Maria Gutierrez, recently appointed. It was an opportunity to also meet with Emergency Management Department and talk about emergency preparedness with a number of our council generals as to the foreign nationals that they represent and provide services for. We also had a presentation on domestic violence and on our outreach and engagement with victims of domestic violence to, again, state and reinforce the protections that all Angelenos enjoy, regardless of their status, relative to being victims of domestic violence. This last week, we also met with, actually just yesterday, District Attorney Jackie Lacey hosted a meeting to introduce myself with new recently appointed public defender, Ricardo Garcia. Mr. Garcia and myself, Ms. Lacey, we spoke about our efforts with juvenile diversion and working on expanding that pre-arrest diversion practices throughout not just the city of Los Angeles, but I'm hopeful that we're going to see that program expand across the entire county. Lastly, last night, with the support of Operations, or Office of Special Operations and Community Engagement Group, we brought in and called for a meeting of parents of adult cadet members, as well as other cadet members. There's been some recent developments in the evolution of that program and in changes that, particularly in dealing with cadets that are 18 and older, that caused some concerns that I heard back from in my office, parents that were unclear, did not agree with a path forward, and I took the opportunity to meet with them, again under the leadership with Chief Grimal and Commander Woodyard, and we spent a couple hours last night, and I believe that we were able to clarify a number of issues and some misinformation and misunderstanding, but also recognizing as we're moving forward in the evolution of the cadet program and identifying appropriate roles for youth versus young adults, that I've directed that we're going to hold off on the evolution of that program for 6 months to allow the current adults within the program to better understand roles and opportunities within the organization, such as our volunteer program, police reserves, also civilian hiring, and intern programs that we have that we're desirous of them transitioning into as we continue to ensure that the cadet program is truly meeting its needs or meeting its goals of developing the young people of Los Angeles for future leadership opportunities, while also balancing the huge life changes that occur between a young man or woman who's 13 years of age and that of a 19 or 20-year-old adult that is in that same program. So I was encouraged by the large turnout. We had about 50 of our parents that came, and it was a good conversation. Let me move over to, and of course, I'm always available on any of these topics, sidebar or outside of this meeting, to talk about the status of anything I talk about in significant events. Relative to crime, we saw last week was the 9th week in a row that we were either at or below violent crime, the number of violent crimes that we had seen the previous year during the same period. So I'm proud to see that continued results. We have a reduction of 3.6% in overall violent crime. And our homicides as of this last Saturday, are 243 versus 266 same period last year. That is just an 8.6% reduction. The success in that area is directly attributable to our reduction in gang-related homicides. Overall, we have a 2.5% reduction in overall crime. The one area of concern continues to be our personal thefts. We will, just as a footnote, be providing a year-end crime report that will also include a year-end report on our homicides and our analysis of trends and information as to the nature of homicide here in Los Angeles. For the year of 2018, that report will be available in the first quarter of 2019, and we intend to have to participate with the mayor's office with a press conference for the year-end results on crime and just the state of Los Angeles of LAPD be towards the latter part of January. And other matters regarding the officer-involved shootings, which I each week will talk and reference. We've had a total of 31 officer-involved shootings this year versus 41 last year. That is a 24% reduction, and it is a reduction over our 4-year average of 17%. The number of fatal officer-involved shootings this year remains at 11. Last year, that number was 15 year to date. In regards to our traffic collisions, we continue to see a reduction in the total number of fatal traffic collisions, despite a violent weekend this past, losing 2 individuals, both who were experiencing homelessness. One that was in a vehicle that was struck in a hit and run, and actually a pedestrian also, a homeless individual that was struck in a hit and run fatality. Year to date, we've had 217 fatal traffic collisions. That number was 226 last year. And again, the area that, while we still have an overall reduction of motor vehicle versus ped fatalities of just over 7%, our cyclists involved, bicyclists involved traffic collisions, both involving serious injury as well as death, is up just over 4%. 127 cyclists were injured in either a very serious injury or fatality versus 122 last year. And if you go back 4 years, that number was 127 year to date now versus 108 in 2014. And so our efforts with the cycling public and the motoring public to share the road, to honor the rules of the road, and be mindful of each other's presence on the road, it remains a pressing and important concern. In regards to sworn and civilian personnel statistics, sworn personnel on payroll is 10,015. Civilian personnel on payroll are 2,980, and our reserve officers are numbered at 387, and our cadets are at 1,428. And this Saturday we have the next graduating class of cadets at the USC Galen Center. Of course, commissioners as well as the public are invited to attend and observe these young men and women as they accomplish that endeavor. And happy to answer any questions. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Any commissioner questions, Chief?
Thank you for that thorough report, as always, Chief, and just want to appreciate your leadership on pre-arrest diversion. Really is a model for the county and the country, and appreciate all the proactive efforts you're making both to implement pre-arrest diversion for young people in LAPD and influence other law enforcement agencies in the county to do the same.
Thank
you. Public comments on the Chief's report?
We have 6 public comment cards.
Okay.
We have the Red Chief Hunt, followed by Mr. Novick and Wayne. He's not here.
Still here.
And Melina Abdullah.
Novick is here. And Wayne is not here.
The Red Chief.
Right.
Is not. Mr. Novick.
Mr. Novick?
There's an incident during the week in the Valley where officers were in pursuit of a drunk driver and stopped the car, and he ran out. He was taken down. The TV coverage said, "Look at that officer take him down," as if it was a football play. So I'm just curious about what the procedure is on pursuit of a drunk driver. Doesn't seem like a very wise effort. I think that it's commendable that there were no shootings or killings this week. But my concern is that you've reported several times on meetings with DA Jackie Lacey, 2 or 3 meetings in a row. You've had meetings with her about something, and I'm curious if you've ever urged the district attorney to file charges on cases where there has been disciplinary procedures in the department resulting in termination or dismissal or findings of police killings that were out of policy, because the district attorney has never prosecuted any police officers in her entire tenure of 5 years, even in cases such as Zell Ford or Brendan Glenn, where the police commission and the chief ruled that the officers were not following procedure in the killings that took place. So if you haven't done so, I would urge you to do so, because I think it demonstrates a disregard for the rule of law and for the sanctity of the life of people in the city of Los Angeles.
Next speaker.
Melina Abdullah.
Professor.
So this is a request that we've submitted a couple of times. In your reports, it would be helpful if you would not confine the report to officer-involved shootings. That's not the only way police kill people. So if we could have that, and if we could also, in the closed session items, if it could be noted whether or not the incident resulted in death or not, because it just says who the person is and gives the date, but it doesn't say whether or not they died. So that would be helpful to the community as we engage in democracy. This is what this is supposed to be. I'm actually here because Albert Ramon Dorsey's family asked that I come and speak directly to you, Chief Moore. They've been requesting his belongings for the last 43 days. They've been in touch with the family liaison who keeps bouncing them around from person to person. Finally, some belongings were forwarded to him, but the most important ones, his computer, his cell phone, his gym membership card, and his cash, were missing from what was forwarded to him. And so they're requesting that you get to the bottom of it and that you forward his belongings. Ramon was a music artist who was killed inside 24-Hour Fitness in Hollywood on October 29th by 10 LAPD officers while he was naked in the dressing room. And they want his music. They want those things so they can have his music. That's what his family is requesting. We know that justice is a much longer ask, but at the very least, you can treat this black family with the same respect and courtesy that you treated the white family that was here a few weeks ago.
The next speaker, Adam Smith, followed by Michael Williams.
Good morning, Chief. I want to bring up property again. I know that I believe without hyperbole that the police exist to protect the property of, the white owning class. And I know that folks in all of your positions scoff at that. But you were at that Venice town hall, or public safety town hall, where I heard that, you shunned the idea of these planters that keep popping up, right? And, I've talked to Sergeant Sapp from the Chief of Staff's office multiple times. He told me that they're obviously all unpermitted. We know that. In order to get rid of them, we can put in 311 requests. I've done that. That didn't work. He says his hands, the police department's hands are tied because it's not a police issue, but I beg to differ. This is property that's being installed illegally by the wealthy, mostly white, owning class of Venice and beyond Venice, and the police aren't doing anything about it. But if the roles were reversed and it was a different demographic that was installing illegal things in the public sidewalk, I do believe that would be a police issue. If unhoused folks got together and decided to build structures in the middle of a public sidewalk, I believe that the LAPD would show up and deal with that. So, I just wanted to get that on the official record that, this is just a further of the case that what property is important to the LAPD and what's not.
And we have no other comment cards on this? Oh, I'm sorry, we have Mr. Michael Williams. On the Chief's report?
Chief's report or public comment? Yes, we'll do public comment after the Chief's report. Mr. Williams.
So again, the idea that you stand for the community and all these in your report, you always talk about like community engagement and how you're helping the community with domestic violence issues and other things like that, and you're not addressing the biggest issue that you purposely cause, which is the violence against black and brown people caused by your officers. And you still have not, this commission has not, you have not done any significant change to the police department to make that decline. You talk about averages and 4-year averages, and you didn't kill as many people as you did last year. Maybe didn't get enough opportunities to kill people as you did last year. It doesn't matter. The fact is that you're still killing people in double digits each year, and that should be your number one priority, but it's not. And as Hamid said, came up here and said, it just shows more of how this system that we have does not work. It doesn't operate in the way that it needs to operate. And you constantly coming up, I think it's like horribly insensitive and horribly just telling that you continually put out reports, or in your reports you talk about all these community engagements, all these things that the police department does, but you're not talking about what are you doing to address the major issue that most people have with the police department, which is you murdering their family members. So forget all the domestic violence stuff, forget all the stuff, the accolades, forget all the you want a pat on your back for doing something. Do something about what you are supposed to be doing something about. Do that first. Then worry about all the other stuff. Stop giving yourself pats on the back reports to tell the community how much you're helping them when you're also just murdering their children.
We go to public comment now?
Yes, sir, we have 14 cards.
Okay.
We have the Red Chief.
Not here.
Gina Viola, Mr. Novick, Christina Anastasia Nelson.
I want to show you a photo I took today. Can I come up and show this to you? Or? Okay. Everyone, I just want you to see what it looks like, what we look back at while we try and address you in this environment that is already a very difficult one for us to attend. It is very difficult to get here on a Tuesday morning. It is very difficult for people to come to LAPD headquarters, especially family members of people who have been killed or harmed by police. It is especially difficult to get up here and speak thoughtfully when we know what we say has little to no impact. I was appreciative that there was a lot of discussion after a lot of what I think were very thoughtful comments that the public made, and that looks like some attempt to be listening to what's being said here, but still the end result is the same. And it's hostility. To have police surrounding us, looking at us like that while we're trying to address you, it's difficult. It's really difficult, and it's hard to continue to come. I know that I come on behalf of other people who cannot be here. So I've made it a point in my life to make this a priority so that I can be here for people who cannot be here. But you should hold these meetings out in the community. They should be held in the evening when people can attend. Thank you.
Hi, I came in here June 26th. I don't know if you remember me. I told you that when
There's a helicopter flying over me when I take a shower at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. It took me 2 years to realize those were cops. I did not know that. And I told you I don't care if LAPD, the aerial unit, wants to watch me, clean my hemorrhoids. I really don't care. But they've used police technology to steal my mother's heirloom jewelry. My mother is 86. She has Alzheimer's. Your police officers have entered our house while I'm here as a substitute teacher at LA Unified, have entered my mother's house, have stolen everything. We keep our jewelry in the hamper, I've already told you that, with bloody socks on top. No burglar would ever find our jewelry. But I didn't get to finish and tell you what also they're doing. They're wasting taxpayers' money. Depending on what school I go to a different school every day. They stage fake lockdowns. Because I've complained to so many people, including the FBI. I have a relative that's an FBI agent. Now what they do is they don't say we're looking for someone. What they do is they call the principal and say we're doing a, what do you call that, a practice drill or whatever. And the principal has no reason not to believe them. The last fake lockdown they did was November 8th. I was at Nava, which is on the same location as Jefferson High School. I went up to the police officer and I said, this is a fake lockdown. And he just looked at me like they always do. And, just to get back at me, I gave you this license plate last time. They have a person at the DMV, your police officers, the IT department up there, that I can even identify 2 of your police officers or whoever they are that work in your IT department. Do you realize that they can watch you with satellite technology? I mean, your daughters.
Next speaker, Mr. Novick.
So my name is Michael Novick, and I don't understand why you keep calling me Mister. I fill out a lot of
I'll
cards.
call you whatever you want. What do you want me to call you from now on?
Yeah, Michael Novick, the same way you say Michael Williams, the same when I'm called up. Some of the cards I write Michael, and some I just put my first initial. But
Michael Novick, there you go.
Thank you. It's just that you don't call anybody else Mister, so I don't know what it reflects. Yeah, that's right. So I'll reiterate what Gina Viola said. I think that these meetings should be held outside of the police administration building in the evenings in the community every week, not once or 3 or 4 times a year or 6 times, whatever you claim that you do. I just want to know where we can see the budget for the police commission. I hadn't realized until this meeting that you hire the hearing examiners and for these Board of Rights, and if there are you said there was something like 60 Board of Rights hearings last year, so that's must be a substantial sum of money that's being spent. So I'm just curious where we can see the budget for last year or this year for the police commission, how many employees there are in addition to the executive director or the inspector general who are paid, and how much money is being spent on that. So if that's a public document somewhere, I'd appreciate knowing where it is.
Audrey George, Adam Smith, and Michael Williams.
It's been raised so many times, our objection to having the meetings at this time and place. So I'm asking if there's any answer to why not change the venue regular basis to evenings, weekends, to a place outside of police headquarters. Why, all I can think of as to why you insist on holding meetings at a time and place when so few people can attend is because it's easier for you to think of and address your community members that come here week after week as fringe elements. Whereas if you held meetings and when you do at a more accessible time and place and many people come, it's probably harder for you to just dismiss us and disrespect us like that. The police commission is part of the police department, and that's so embodied in the decisions you make about where to hold these meetings. You are not an independent oversight commission. I'd like anyone to correct me, but in my understanding and all the times I've been here, not once has this commission ever declined to approve a report, an audit, a request from LAPD for under consent or regular agenda items. Never once in my memory have you ever voted against what the LAPD is asking of you. Yeah, really. It's only been 4 years, so I might have missed something. It's wrong to think that this commission, as a de facto element of the police department, can audit, review, discipline, investigate its own officers.
Next speaker, please.
Adam Smith, followed by Michael Williams and Mr. Juarez.
I concur with what's been said so far. Obviously, it's ridiculous that this is the time and place that this meeting is held. But I did want to mention something specifically today. You know, it bugs me that people, and specifically people that have been killed by this police department, you know, are turned into numbers, are turned into statistics and, you know, just pieces of a report. A few weeks ago, you know, Steve approached me outside and said, "Oh, don't worry, Mr. Smith, it's not about policing." But you all have that privilege that you can walk away from all of that stuff, you know, and say, well, you know, I'm not thinking about policing right now. I'm not a part of policing right now. I'm just a grandfather, or whatever. But so many people that come into this room don't have the luxury and the privilege to walk away from all the stuff that happens in this room. And I just want to lift up that Valerie Rivera would be here today to lift up her son, Eric Rivera, except she is at her lawyer's office today and tomorrow, listening in person, getting the depositions from the two coward-ass cops just to lift up her words that murdered her son on June 6, 2017, her unarmed son. Within 7 seconds of them driving up on him, they were out of their car and he was shot 7 times. So just wanted to lift up Eric Rivera's name this morning.
The next speaker, please, Michael Williams. Mr. Juarez. Terry Akins. John Avalos Rios. And Jacqueline Richardson.
Hi. I'm still having the same issue. It still seems to be Carmen in the film permitting office. Again, it's harassment, and it seems to be your permitting division of LAPD that is connecting with them. Yes, it's producers. I've known them forever. And, you know, they include my roommates, okay? There's nothing I can do about the entertainment industry stalking me. I just can't seem to get them off. They're just parasites. I've tried so hard, but they just won't leave me alone. And, you know, even to the point now of where I've had to get involved in the next election for the supervisors in my area. And it's ridiculous that I have to even do these things. I'm not a politician. I don't care about entertainment. I'm not an actress. I've never wanted to be famous. I hate public speaking. So what is it that you guys really want from me? That's all I've ever asked for. Why? It started again. My first stalker was Oprah Winfrey. Sorry, guys, but that's true. And I've just never been able to get them off me. Yes, it's started in Chicago, and it's very weird, but I want it to stop. So I don't know what you can do, Mr. Moore, about your permitting division. Maybe they need a timeout or a vacation or whatever, but enough is enough. It does include your Van Nuys division because it's my ex-brother-in-law who was Cablevision, which became Time Warner Cable, head of programming. So, you know, I don't know what to do, but they won't leave me alone.
Next speaker.
I thought Valerie was going to be here today to talk about Eric, because a lot of the parents, as we get close to Christmas, they need some soothing music. Something to help them get through the days. But since there's so few of us, and there's a lot of us from the community that are always here waiting to talk, it's very frustrating. That's why I'm getting on the bus and I'm going to follow Rosa Parks. Because she's getting on the bus. She's going to make a fuss. I'm following Rosa Parks. She's getting on the bus. She's going to make a fuss. That's why I'm following Rosa Parks. Following Rosa Parks. You can join me. Following Rosa Parks. 'Cause she's getting on the bus. She's gonna make a fuss. I'm following Rosa Parks. Come on, join me. Following Rosa Parks. Following Rosa Parks. 'Cause she's getting on the bus. She's gonna make a fuss. Following Rosa Parks. I really think that you should have the meetings in the community, not once in a while. You establish a time in the community that we know you're always going to have it, okay? Please try to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Jacqueline Richardson, followed by John Ramirez, Paula Miner, and Hamid Khan.
Those are the last speakers.
And those are the last, sir.
As you know, there's no longer a draft. If the United States needs men, there's no draft. People decided they wouldn't go to the army because they didn't want to kill innocent people. There's no longer a draft. Then how do they get the men to join the army? They volunteer. If there are not enough volunteers, they get volunteers from around the world, only from selected nations. Only selected nations, the ones that make it, can get into the United States Army. You probably figured it out already that they don't get equal benefits. The benefits that the volunteers from other nations get are not always equal. So I don't know. Then you have people that are not from the United States guarding the United States problems in areas, Israel, other parts of the nation. Sometimes maybe people wonder, are they going to be faithful to the United States? Or are they going to, who are they faithful to, their own nation or the United States? That hasn't been an open question, but sometimes I wonder if they're going to be always faithful to the United States. So to sum up again, there's no draft. The Americans, if they want to go into the services, they volunteer. And if there are not enough volunteers, they get people from other nations from around the world. Only a few select nations are allowed to volunteer, I believe. I don't know that for sure. I'm assuming that they only select a few select nations to come over here and offer their services. And they probably don't all get the same benefits. I heard one man say that he didn't get the benefits that some of the other people got. So there's no longer any draft. And anyone from the United States in the service may or may not be a United States citizen. You don't know that because they could have volunteered their services.
John Ramirez.
Hello, my name is John Ramirez, and I'm here to ask the Police Commissioner's Department for some help. I've been here numerous times. I'm fighting a case where my daughter was molested with a couple of LAPD officers in the house during the time of the incident. The house was raided. There was videos and of kids being molested, pictures of child pornography, money and videos. And I've known these police officers during a 10-year relationship with my daughter's mother. But the part is, too, there was already an ongoing investigation of molestation in the same house. And I'm being threatened in the street numerous times of the evidence that I have hidden by these officers and their family members that are gang-related. I've came here before, and I was told that somebody from the police commissioner's office would call me, and I never got the phone call. The other times I went to the internal affairs, and what I gave them copies of, they cannot find anymore, they say. So now I'm like, don't know what to do again, and I'm waiting for a court date that I finally filed and went through. But in the meantime, I'm still being threatened, and in the streets by these officers, and I know who they are, and I have evidence of them. I've ran into them numerous times, and it's just nothing's going good. It's just keep getting threatened, numerous times in the streets by these same officers. One of them's already retired, but he's still there with the other one. So I don't know what to do about this.
Sir, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Mark Smith, Inspector General for LAPD. I'm not sure you had contact with our office previously. First of all, I'm sorry that you're experiencing this, but I want to make sure we are able to get in touch with you and make sure we have information from you as well. We have someone from my staff who's here. If you can stick around for a moment, we'll make sure to meet with you today and make sure we have the information, okay?
Sure, definitely. Thank you.
And just so you understand, the Office of Inspector General actually works directly for the Board of Police Commissioners, and so we will reach out to him as well. I will, my office, so that you only have one point of contact. That's the Office of Inspector General. Because it sounds as if, by your remarks, you've reached out to our internal affairs. I don't want you to have to go back down that road again. So we'll have you work with the Office of Inspector General, and we'll ensure that this matter is investigated.
Thank you.
Paula Miner, followed by Hamid Khan.
Somehow the gang enforcement detail item just slipped by us, but I want to just speak to you, Dale Bonner and Shane Goldsmith, that when this item was up, I think there was a failure to make this connection between data-driven evidence-based policing, the Community Safety Operations Center, the CSOCs, which of course now they have one in 77th, and at least we were told the other in Central, and there's supposed to be 4 throughout the city, 1 per bureau, and the role of gang enforcement details. So the names that I'm going to read are some of the ones that we've heard of: Richard Risher, Jesse Romero, Keith Bursey, Omar Gonzalez, Kenny Watkins, Daniel Perez, Robert Diaz, Fred Barragon, Umar Bagana, Carnell Snell. And some of these names, Dale Bonner, people were murdered by the LAPD. And what's interesting about this whole thing is that these were murdered in laser zones, within or near around laser zones as well. These were murdered by Metro officers or gang enforcement detail officers. So we have to, when we are talking about these intricacies, I think the two of you are a part of the subcommittee that is going to be looking at data-driven evidence-based policing. I think it's really incumbent to dig deeper. I mean, we are doing that. We are doing that. Mark Smith's office is doing an audit of the program, but we don't hold, we're not holding our breath, because as we have heard him speak about it, there seems to be that there's a whole lot of cover-up going on. But I think it is really incumbent upon you to look into it, to ask these questions. What is the relationship between gang enforcement details when the hiring is going on? What is the relationship between them and CSOCs? What is the relationship between CSOC and data-driven evidence-based policing? What is going on as these names and people are labeled as persons of interest and chronic offender bulletins without having done anything, and these most wanted posters are out there, so they become high threat people. So I think what you're doing is you're creating conditions on the ground that would lead to more murders, because people are
Let's go to the closed session items, please.
We're on closed session items. We have one card on 581 and one card on 582 from M. Novick. And I apologize, sir, I'm the one that added the Mr.
Michael Novick.
Discipline for officer-involved shooting. This is case 00218. So, you are less than a year behind, and I think that reflects the fact that there were fewer killings. I think that I think it was last week in his report, the chief said that the goal is 0 killings, and I think that he also said there would be an annual report based on what took place in 2017 by March. I think that report should include, if this is not just a statistical anomaly, what was done to reduce the number of killings and shootings, and what can be done to reduce them further. I think it's incumbent on the Police Commission to think about, as I've said repeatedly, patterns and practices of the department and what kind of policies could be used, not just to evaluate the individual officer in the individual shooting. I note this is the victim in this case was named Macias, so that's I think if the annual report could look at the question of how many of the people who are shot and killed by the LAPD are black and brown, and how that's reflected over the years, and whether that's increased or decreased, that would be of great interest to the community. You had 2 police officer 3s in this case, and I'd repeat what I think it was Gina Viola said earlier, or no, Dr. Abdullah actually asked if in addition to just saying officer-involved shootings, if you can indicate in each case whether there was a death, whether someone was killed in the shooting. I think that would be very, very helpful to the community again. So again, I urge you to think about both patterns and practices because the police department over the years has been, distinct in how many people have been killed, and also what policies you can. Yet another officer-involved shooting. This is case 3 of 18. Took place in January 11th of this year. Involved 1 captain and 4 police officer 3s. So again, between the 2 cases today, you're looking at 2, 6, 7 different people. Again, I think the question of the systemic nature of this is incumbent upon you to deal with over the course of the year. If you're looking at 2 or 3 cases a week, with 7 or 8 or 10 sometimes, or 12 officers, that's a very substantial number of officers involved in these shootings and uses of force. And I think it speaks to the need for what the community keeps asking for over and over again, is how can the department change its mission and change its relationship to the community so it's not carrying out these killings over and over again. I don't know if D.H. White is white or black, but I think that the question of the racial makeup of the people who are targeted and affected by these killings is something that you need to consider and make public.
Okay.
We have no other comment cards on closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A1 and 5A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
That's correct. Currently, it does not prohibit. Yes. There is one who is a long-term hearing examiner who is a retired peace officer. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Just think. Yeah. That's correct. That's correct. What it says is it says that they can. Whereas before
You're here. It's
Troy's here for us. All right. Mics are hot.
Oops. Okay.
The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 5A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.